Welcome back to our Richest YouTube channel. In today's class, we are going to learn how to make this beautiful halterneck backless tiered dress. You can see that it has layers to it. The neckline is gathered and it has like a turtleneck collar there. The back is actually backless. I'm going to turn it so that we can see. You can see that we gathered the back and it doesn't have fabric. The rope is what you use connecting the front and back together, and it is stretchy, very comfortable and very free dress. If this is something you like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you.
This dress is it's like a tiered dress, like a Caribbean dress. I just have a rough sketch of what we have here. It has 5 layers, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. The back is sort of like backless, which means that for me, number 1 and number 2 is not going to be part of the back. So the back bodice is going to start from the 3, 4 and 5. So I'm going to only work with 1 and 2 for the front. Okay, so now to calculate the length that I'm going to be using for each of these pieces, each layer, for each layer is totally up to you and what you want to work with. Okay, so I'm going to assume number 1 and 2 to be my half length. Okay, this is going to be my half length, and then from here all the way to the M is going to be my full bodice, full measurement. So the full measurement, I want it to be around 40 inches, and then for my half length is 18 inches. So which means this total 18 inches is going to be off for the back. The back is not going to have this. So if you don't want yours to be this low at the back, you know what to do. You just reduce it, okay, from the first two layers that you have. That's how you can manipulate it. Okay, so now this is going to be around 18 inches. The total is 40 inches, which means if you want to know the total length for the leftover, you just need to deduct what we have here. So from here to here now, for the 3 layers, if I deduct 40 from 18 inches, I'm going to have 22 inches to share for the last 3 layers that I have. I hope you understand this. Okay, so we are going to treat this first because we're only working with the front, so we are treating the first 2 first. So for the first 2, I said I want the total to be around 18 inches, but remember we have like a collar here and it's stopping like it's starting around our natural neckline, which is normally, remember, you take a depth of 3 inches. We use 3 inches by 3 inches for our neckline on our basic bodies. So now these 3 inches that we have already used for the depth, I'm going to take it off. So if I deduct the 3 inches from 18, it means I have 15 inches to share between these 2 layers. So you can share it equally, or you can make one layer more than the other. So if I'm sharing 15 inches equally, I'm going to cut 7.5 inches for this, 7.5 inches for this. Okay, but because we are still going to join together, you need to add like 1 inch allowance to it. So I'll go ahead and cut 8.5 for this and 8.5 for this, because I'm sharing equally. So this is for the length. Remember I said we are leaving these 3 first. We are working with these first 2. So I'll cut 8.5 inches length and 8.5 inches length for this. So to know the width of the fabric you are going to cut, I'm going to be working with my bust measurement. The bust measurement is 40. Okay, the bust measurement is 40 inches. So now, because this is just going to be in front, remember this first 2 is not at the back, it's going to be in front, so I'm going to divide it by 2 for my front alone, and that's going to be 20 inches. So the width I'm going to be working with for the first one is going to be 20 inches by 8.5 inches, which is what I have cut here. Okay, this is my first layer. I'm going to be working with 20 inches by 8.5 inches. For the second layer now, depending on how full you want it to be, remember you are going to be pleating the second layer onto this first layer. This is the first layer. You are going to be pleating the second layer here on the hem of the first layer. So these 20 inches that I have cut for the first layer, you can multiply it by 2 or 1.5 depending on the amount of fabric you have. So if you are multiplying this by 2, it means for the second layer you go ahead and cut out 8.5 length by 40 inches. Okay, which is what I have cut here. Okay, mine is not so up to 40 inches. I think I have about 38 inches thereabouts, but you can clearly see that it is more than what I have here. So that we can understand it, I'm going to be taking it step by step. I'll go ahead and gather this to this now, and then bring it back to show us the next thing to do. So as you can see now, I have gathered number 2 to number 1. Okay, from our sketch you can see 2 and 1. So this is number 2 now. It is gathered to number 1, and what I did was to hem it on the side. This is the part it's going to show. Remember, there is no back there, so this part is going to show. That's why I decided to, I have gone ahead to hem it. I've gone ahead to hem it, so you can add few allowances. Remember, we cut out 20 inches for the first one, so you can add your hemming allowances to it, and you want it to be really full, you can even use more than your actual bust measurement. But this is what I have now. The next thing I'm going to do now is to create my collar. I want to take it in bits so that we can understand this better. So what we're working on now is this collar. So it's going to be tied at the back. So depending on how long you want it to be, I just have about 60 inches here for mine. You can make it as long as possible. So after cutting it out, I have 60 inches by, this is around 40 inches, sorry, around 6 inches, depending on how wide you want the collar to be. So now by the time I put it on fold, I'll have 3 inches, and then if I sew it on both sides by half an inch, I will have a width of 2.5 inches, which is fine for me. If you want yours to be 2 inches, then you cut out 5 inches. So by the time you fold it, you have 2.5, and then if you fold on both sides, you have your 2 inches. So now I have notched the midpoint of the strap, so you can see the notch here. So what I'm going to do now, this part you can actually measure it on your neckline, where exactly you want this to be placed. But what I'm going to do now is to gather all of this to 7 inches. Okay, so after gathering this to 7 inches, I will knot the center point, then I'll sew 3.5 inches to this side and 3.5 inches to this side, and then I'm going to cover it up and then sew the rest of the strap. I'll go and sew. By the time I sew it, to understand it better. So between 6 to 7 inches is fine, but you can measure that part on your body. So I'll first gather this to the 7 inches, and then I'll centralize it and place my center knot at the center part of my gathers, and then I will sew it and then turn it neatly, then sew the strap. So with this, we are done with the first 2 stages, and then we'll continue with the other levels. Okay, so as you can see, I've gone ahead to sew the collar in. So this is what the neckline looks, and this strap is what you're going to use, and I also sewed the strap all to the back. So this is what you're going to use to tie it, and this is what it looks like. You can see it's like an halter neck, and this is 2.5 inches in width. So now we are taking care of the collar of the first layer, the second layer. Now we are moved to the third, fourth, and fifth layer. Like I said, the total length that I need to make up the 40 inches is 22 inches. So this 22 inches now, if I divide it into 3, because I want 3 of them to have equal length, I'll have about 7.3 inches there about. So I'll approximate that to probably 8 inches. So you can see that what I am using is very similar. That's because that's how I'm distributing it. If you want this part to be longer than what you have there, you just need to increase it, and then you reduce what you're using here, which means that your back will be very low. I don't want my back to be too low. That's why I'm leaving it at around my half length area. So I don't want the back to be so low. That's why I'm leaving it at 18 inches, because the back is not going to have anything for the first 2 layers. So now for the 3 layers that is left, we have agreed that the length is going to be 8 inches each. So for the width, okay, remember the number 3 is going to be gathered to number 2, and for our number 2 here, which is this, we used about 40 inches. Remember, that's 2 of what we used for the first one. We used about 40 inches. So for the number 3, you can multiply your 40 inches by 2 or by 1.5. So if you multiply by 2, you have about 80 inches. Okay, so for me now, I have my third layer, which is this. Okay, so this is my third layer. It's about 80 inches in length. If you want it to be really full, I think I'm working with around 2.5 yards of fabric, so I don't have so much fabric to work with. But if you want it to be really full, you can cut about 120 inches. So I have about 80 inches here. I remember that because not like, it's not going to be like 1 and 2. For 1 and 2, you just get us for the front, but from number 3 is going to go all round to the back as well. So this number 3 we're going to be working for is going to be used for both front and back. So now to gather this, what I'm going to do is to go ahead and notch the center part. Okay, you can see what I'm doing. I am notching the center. So after notching the center, I'm going to go ahead now and notch the sides as well, because I'm using this for both front and back. So I want this to serve as a guide, so that I will not go and use what I'm going to use for the front for the back again. So now I'm notching it on the side. So after notching it on the sides now, and I open it out, I know that from here to here, from one side to the other side, this is the center. You can see the notch at the center. This is the center. So from one notch to the other, which is the side, that's what I'm going to be sewing for the front. So the other one that I have here is going to be for my back. I don't know if you understand it. All this gathering that I'm gathering now, I'll just gather it to the front. That's from one side to the other. Remember, we notched the side. So from this side to the other side here, I'm going to gather it, and the one that I have left, which is this one, is what is going to be used for my back. I want to take it in bits. I don't want to do everything together so that we don't get confused. So I'll go and gather this now and bring it back to show us what we'll have. You can see now that I have gone ahead to gather the third layer, okay, from one side to another where I had notched this. You can see my notch here, and then I still have this. So what I have left here is what is going to be for my back. You can see, remember I said the third layer is going to start having the back. From the third, fourth and fifth layer is going to be inclusive of the back. So this part that is not sewn is the back. So for this back now, to gather it to fit the actual size that you want, you are going to be making use of an elastic. So now this seam that I used, this half an inch that I used to sew this in, is what I'm going to use to create a casing. So I'm using like a tiny elastic, so I'll just manage it. If you want it to be more, you use more to sew here so that I can have more space for your casing. So this is what I'm going to use to create casing like this for my elastic. So I'm going to create the casing, and then I'm going to run an elastic through it. So before I do that, I want to go ahead and sew the fourth and fifth layer to this now. So now we are sewing it all the way all round to what we have here. Remember, they are all going to the back. So now for the fourth layer, remember I cut out 80 inches for the width of the third. So for this, I'm just increasing it by 40 inches. So I'll go ahead and I cut 80 for the third, I'm cutting 120 for the fourth, and then I'm going to cut 160 inches for the width of the 3, 4 and 5. Then for the length remains the same, 8 inches. So I have cut them out here. This is the fourth layer, and this is the fifth layer. It's quite long. I have to join fabric together. So this is the fourth and this is the fifth. So I'll go ahead and sew the fourth to the third, and then I'm going to sew the fifth to the fourth. So after doing this now, I'm going to bring it back for us to see what it looks like. I have gathered the fourth and fifth as well. So you can see this is the first one, the second, third, fourth and the fifth. So you just go ahead and aim the last one on the lower part. And then for the back, remember we have number 3, 4 and 5 for the back, which is this is the center back. Okay, so this is the center back. As we have seen, you just have 3, 4 and 5. You can see that number 1 and 2 is just in the front, which makes it a backless gown. So after that, I just went ahead to sew it at the center, okay, so that it can all be together. So I've joined it at the center, but you can see how wide it still is at the back. It's still very, very wide. This is not the actual size. So now to control this width, I'm going to pass an elastic. You can see I have created a casing with my seam allowance here, and I'm going to work with this elastic. You just need a little elastic so that it can be as fit as possible. So from here now, I'm going to start passing the elastic, and then once you pass it to some extent and you see that it is all in, you're going to hold this part with a stitch. Once all of this is inside, you're going to go ahead and hold it with your stitch just like this. You can see. So once I have everything inside on this side, you're passing it from one side to the other. So now this part that is inside, I'm going to hold it to the stitch so that I can pass to the other side as well and hold. So I'll go and do this now. I have passed my elastic. The total length of the elastic I used here is just 6 inches. You can see it's small. I want it to be as firm as possible, so this is the elastic that I passed for the back. It's just 6 inches. Yours can be more, okay, but that's what I passed. And then I hemmed it on the lower part. You can see that the lower part now is neatly hemmed. This is what the front looks like, okay, and this is what the back looks like. So here you just make sure to finish all of these rough edges. You can serge it, just make sure it's neat. And I'll take this to the mannequin now so that we can see what it looks like.
Okay, so this is what the dress looks like. You can see how beautiful and free it is. So yours can be as full as you want, and this is what the back looks like. Like I said, I just used around 6 to 7 inches elastic for my back. You can see how it is gathering it and controlling the front so that the bust is going to be well covered, and the rope can be as long as you want. It can extend to where the back starts so that it's going to cover the back for you as well. I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful tutorial with me. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.